Hello and welcome to The Conversation, and I'm caught one more time up on Cypress Avenue. But I'm not here to see Van Morrison, but another Belfast music legend, not Celtic Soul, but Ulster Punk, the godfather of Ulster Punk, Terri Hooley. His life story is soon to be turned into a major new film, which begins shooting this summer. But I wanted to find out what was Terri's cult film. Right, Terri, thank you very much for joining us on The Conversation.
Great honour, thank you.
Now, the film that you have chosen is from 1969.
Yes.
Now, that was a great year for cinema. You actually could have chosen Midnight Cowboy, or you could have chosen Butch Cassidy and the Sundance
Both
Kid,
films which I loved
or
dearly.
even True Grit. That's not the film that you've chosen. Now, the film that you have chosen, not only have I never seen, I've never heard of it. I don't know if many people have. So let's start off by telling us about the film that you have chosen.
Well, Brian, you're absolutely right. A lot of people haven't seen this movie. In fact, when I first saw it at the ABC Cinema in Belfast, I'd been going out with several girls at the same time, of which none of them will talk to me after they all found out. But I met this girl, Anna Morrow, who was like a small version of Bridget Bardot.
Wow.
From Gilnahirk, and I met her at the bus stop, and I took her to see this movie, and there wasn't very many people in the cinema at all. It was a lovely Friday evening, and I just loved this movie. It was just so ridiculous. It wasn't what I was used to going to.
The film that you've chosen is called The April Fools. It's a romantic comedy set in New York, starring Jack Lemmon and Catherine Deneuve.
Yes.
Now,
I'm a huge fan of Catherine Deneuve. I even have a Catherine Deneuve rose,
a rose?
which was paid for by his city council, and I don't know it.
Really?
A friend of mine was going to Paris, and Colin, he looks after the Victorian Greenhouse in Botanic Avenue. So he asked me if there was any records or anything I want brought back. And I said to him, no, just get me some photographs of Catherine Deneuve, postcards or something. And he was talking to a gardener out there. And he told him it was a Catherine Deneuve rose, so he sent away for 3 of them. And he phoned me up and he says, when you get home tonight, there'll be a surprise outside your door. Catherine Deneuve, still flourishing. I never touch it.
Really?
And it's a beautiful rose.
Well, she's still flourishing
And
as well.
she's a wonderful woman. I saw her in Paris a few years ago.
Really, yeah.
So the other 2 roses were put in Botanic Gardens and they both died. But mine still blooms.
Well, there we go. And she still blooms right here today in your film choice. Now,
Yes.
this has been described as a stupid romance. Okay.
Yeah.
The tagline is, he has a wife, she has a husband. With so much in common, they just have to fall in love.
Yeah.
Now, what is the story of this film?
Well, the story is that Jack Lemmon is Howard Brubaker, who's a Wall Street broker, and his boss has he's just got this new job as head of the investment department, and his boss invites him to this party where all the beautiful people are. and he arrives and he rings the doorbell, and there's a marble plinth outside with nothing on it, and Jack Lemmon's sort of fixing his tie in the marble, and Gunther, who is Peter Lawford, comes out and says, what do you think of this? And Brubaker says, should there not be something on it? Mm-hmm. And he says, well, nowadays the less is more and stuff, you know. And he just walks in, and there's all this art, fantastic art, like pop art and stuff, all these statues in the apartment. And he just feels out of place, and he tries to make conversation with people, and eventually sees this girl, and he goes up to her, and as soon as he gets to her, she starts singing Say a Little Prayer, and Catherine Deneuve sees this and starts laughing.
Hold on, we have to... Meg the dog here is barking again. I don't think Meg likes this film. I think that's the problem.
It's just looking like a bit of attention.
Yeah. Oh, she's come.
Here
we go.
Right, you sit down, Meg. That's
right,
great.
Okay, Meg's sitting down. Now that's better.
Like, it's in many situations that I was in when I was younger, when I was hanging around with a lot of artists and older jazz musicians and all, and I was so young and naive, and it was a whole different new world to me. And he feels a bit uncomfortable, a bit out of place, and he's out of his comfort zone. But eventually, he goes up to Catherine Deneuve, taps her on the shoulder, and she turns around and says, Brubaker's the name, can I buy you a drink? And she says, fine, I'll get my things. His boss had given this key to the Safari Club, He says, like a second home to me. So they go to this club, which is absolutely ridiculous. It's like a jungle. It's got lions and cages, and all these waitresses are dressed, dancing girls are dressed up like exotic birds from Africa. And there's parrots and all there. And he's just like, this is a ridiculous situation for him to be in. And have these sort of pop guns with corks on them that you shoot to get a waitress' attention, you shoot her in the behind. And then there's just the most wonderful scene where they're in this lovely glass conservatory and they're talking, and Hart Brubaker says to Catherine about when he was at school and he was in the school play, he played a frog, and this girl had to kiss him and turn him into a prince, but she ran off stage, and Catherine Deneuve just turns around and says, but you are a prince. And they spend the night together.
I mean, it's a screwball comedy. It's an affair to remember. It's the swinging 60s. It's New York. There's something about New York and those parties and that whole party scene which is very attractive, isn't there?
Well, it's not like sort of Andy Warhol type parties. I mean, this is a ridiculous party. It's called a party of the beautiful people. And there's all these people, and they're not. I don't find them very beautiful or attractive at all. Yeah. I mean, it's just a waste of space where I'd be more underground parties, and because it was the end of the hippie era for me. 1969, and Belfast had just completely changed. It was a nightmare, and I was growing up, there was 80 clubs in and around Belfast that I could go to, and bands often went out and played 3 gigs on a Friday and Saturday night, 3 different venues, and then the Troubles came, so it was a bit of escapism for me.
Yeah, absolutely.
When I saw the movie, it might have been actually 1970 when I saw the movie, so it was great. And then, years later, when Good Vibrations set up and things were going well, I hired out Spence Brothers Cinema down in Cumber to show the movie, because I thought I'd never see it again. It never came up on TV or anything.
So this is a fantastic private retro cinema, like a classic golden age.
Oh, fantastic cinema!
Like it's a picture palace in miniature.
Yes, it is, and it's just all the fittings and the velvet and everything. It's just a wonderful cinema to be in. So we hired out the cinema, had these girls with trays. Instead of ice creams or lollies, you had red wine or white wine. And all my mates. And then when I got them all there, I just realised they're all going to hate this movie.
Yes. Now, did they have any idea what film you were going to show?
No, I just told them that they wanted to show this film from the 60s. Right. And they probably would have been happier watching Help or some of the Beatles. And then through the film, I was killing myself laughing. And through the film, I really wondered about, people were generally fairly quiet, and I really wondered. And John T. Davis, the film director, was sitting beside me. And at the end, I swear, when Catherine Deneuve and Jack Lemmon actually get on the plane and to go to Paris, that I swear that John T. Davis had a tear in his eye.
Oh, there you go. See?
So then John, and I said, John, what did you think? It was very important because John and I have known each other a long time. And it was important to me and John said he really liked it and he thought it was good. So I was dead chuffed about it. I very often, especially when I'm in the deeps of depression or just things aren't going well, or if I get a quiet night in on my own, I would stick it on and watch it. And
this is your guilty pleasure.
It really is without a doubt my guilty pleasure.
Now, let's talk about the soundtrack. Any film that you would choose, I would imagine, would have a great soundtrack. Now, we have Burt Bacharach on this, Hal David, Dionne Warwick.
I have a huge, absolutely
the April Fools.
Huge fan. I'm a huge fan of Dionne Warwick and of Burt Bacharach. And she did the theme tune. But also in there, you've got the Chambers Brothers, and you've got Taj Mahal, who's a fantastic blues artist, and Mungo Santa Maria, who I love all that easy listening stuff. When I started selling records, I sent away for 1,000 singles for £40. I found all these gems in them and I started selling them and I started sending away for more. And then I started to move on to albums. And the first, I read in Exchange and Mart that there were 100 LPs for sale for £18. I didn't know what I was getting. And I opened it. And the first record in the box was the soundtrack of the April Fools. Plus the fact that when we showed the movie, the Spence Brothers got me an original poster, which I still have. Because it didn't go, most of my history and the history of the label all went up in the fire, North Street Arcade. But I've still got that poster.
Brilliant.
Which is brilliant.
So the soundtrack is highly recommended.
I don't know if it's highly recommended, but it was well worth 18 pence.
Now, what I love about these conversations is not only do I find out about new films, but also new filmmakers. Now, Stuart Rosenberg,
Yes.
who is the director of this film, he had just directed Cool Hand Luke in 1967,
Yeah.
which was a huge film.
Oh,
with Paul
fantastic
Newman.
film.
Fantastic. So he was at the top of his game, and this was his follow-up film.
Which you wonder why he did it.
Yeah, from Cool Hand Luke
You know,
to the April Fool's.
but I think maybe because of all the intensity and all of Cool Hand Luke, and it was such a, a very emotive subject, that I think he just did this for a bit of a laugh.
No, I think you're right. And I mean, when you look at his...
I think he just needed a bit of light relief after Cool Hand Luke.
And when you look at his career, I mean, he's made some other excellent films. He made The Drowning Pool with Paul Newman. He made The Amityville Horror. He made The Pope of Greenwich Village with Mickey Rourke. And he also made Brubaker, which was another prison film with Robert Redford. And obviously the character in the April Fool is called Brubaker, so there must be some connection there. But I want to talk to you about Jack Lemmon. Tell me about him. Because,
I love Jack Lemmon.
Yeah, because in this, he's the kind of highly strung executive that he's very good at playing.
Yes, and he's always completely out of his depth. And I mean, obviously he's good at his job, and he doesn't have much of a home life. The wife's always having friends round, and his dog hates him, his kid hates him. And he makes just this wonderful vision of delight. Catherine Deneuve, and she's unhappy. And they get talking, and they just really bond together. And he goes in and tells his boss. He didn't realise that it was his boss's wife that he's out with. And it's all, the whole thing is just ridiculous. But it is a case, especially for me, is I was pretty educationally subnormal at school. I went to Ashfield School. And I met this girl one night at a bus stop. And she was like a film star, and I was 14. So my mate Tommy dared me to go up, and I went up and said, "Excuse me, miss, my name is Terry, and my friend has dared me to ask you out. So would you talk to me a minute, and I'll be away." And she says, "Well, Terry, I'm Maureen, and I'm 24 years of age." And she said, "Listen, I'm getting a Dundonald bus here. I'm going out with this guy, and I don't think it'll last tonight. But I'll tell you where I'll be. I'll be in the Belmont Tennis Club dance on Thursday night." So I had never been to dance, and I went home. That Saturday I got up, I had 3 baths. I shaved with my father's old Gillette. I wore Old Spice. You could smell me 3 streets away. That my father wouldn't wear. He got for Christmas, and I pressed my brother's teddy boy jacket, and I thought I was the coolest. And I went to this dance, and she never turned up. And I was standing there, and I was the only one in a teddy boy jacket. I was like, this was the 60s. I was completely out of place. And I was trying to hide the long drapes behind my back. And these 3 girls came up to me and said, "Are you a hard man?" I said, "Oh, no, I'm a pacifist. Don't believe in violence." And I told them a story, and they just adopted me. Oh. And they took me to art galleries, gave me books to read, took me to cinema, took me to parties. They're a lot older than me. Just completely changed my life. So in the way that in this film where Jack Lemmon meets Catherine Deneuve.
I mean, the thing about Jack Lemmon is he's a great comic actor.
Yes.
I mean, like we know
and a serious actor.
from
He's
Some
very
Like
good.
It Hot, but he can do serious as well.
Yes.
I mean, if you look at The Apartment, I mean, there's very few people, like kind of maybe Cary Grant and Jack Lemmon who are so adept at doing both.
Well, the Billy Wilder movies, The Apartment was a big influence in my life, and with Shirley MacLaine, and there's some beautiful photography in the street and all. I was mesmerised by that movie. I just thought Jack Lemmon was wonderful. And a movie which I don't really want to see again, maybe it's because I'm an alcoholic, was The Days of Wine and Roses.
Yes.
Very serious movie, I thought.
Catherine Deneuve, the interesting thing is The April Fools is her first American film.
Yes.
She was a huge star in France.
Huge, absolutely huge.
Belle de Jour.
The Umbrellas of Cherbourg, which I watched recently.
What a film.
I watched it recently, and I'm not really into musicals.
Yeah.
And I loved it.
Yeah.
And to see it again, to see it again after all these years, loved it.
And what was it about the French, do you think, and that she had at that time that was kind of chic and cool and sophisticated in a way?
I think it was because I had never travelled. I'd been to London and stuff, but I'd never been abroad, Belfast to me was like the centre of the universe. I mean, Belfast in the 60s was just the most happening place. Yeah. You could create your own scene, and that's what I did. I started off running folk clubs. in offices and living in offices, and I was living the beatnik's life, and then running a blues society on a Sunday night, which the clubs closed down because you weren't allowed to have entertainment a Sunday night. Belfast was just a place that was so small, everybody was so great. The 60s to me were very, very colourful, very psychedelic. The 70s were just black and white here, and the 80s weren't much better. So I think it was because I love French cinema. I'd seen one film and I really loved it, and it really got me hooked on French cinema. I loved all the way that just the way the French Francois Truffaut and all made their movies, and just were a lot of great innovators, and it was just the excitement of foreign girls to me, because girls were always giving me Vogue magazine and I used to cut up all the photographs of the models and put them all on my wall. I remember having a photograph of Catherine Nerve at her first psychedelic party where we had all these flashing lights and with a huge neon cross, and it was called Underground Art, and I had this photograph like a shrine made to Catherine Deneuve.
I'm going to watch this film. I'm going to seek this film down. I advise everybody else to. I've actually never even seen it on television.
No.
You know, it is a really rare film, but I love the actors in it. I love the director. It comes highly recommended from you, so I'm definitely going to check it out. Now, Terri, just before we finish, I want to ask you, obviously, Good Vibrations, the movie, is finally going to start filming this summer. So how does it feel to you now? Here's us talking about films and cinema, and you yourself are now going to be on the big screen.
It feels pretty strange, to tell you the truth. I have to pinch myself. Like, I was the thickest kid at school. I was very shy. It all started really about, it's 11 years ago. I was working late one night in the shop, and Glenn Patterson was sitting in the Crown, and he invited me over, and he was with these RTE guys who were very interested in my life and how I kept my sanity through all the troubles and all, and hadn't taken sides and did alternative things and partied a lot. And I said, "What sanity?" And Glenn came to me a few days later and he said, "You know what? That would make it fantastic." So we turned down 2 movie contracts before. But I always wondered, why can't we make a movie with Northern Ireland people? So I waited all that time, and we waited. And eventually we got the right people. Got Andrew Eaton, who was a customer in the shop, who worked on 24-hour party people. Glenn had worked on it. We didn't do anything for about 8 years, and then all of a sudden there was this renewed interest. And then they took it over to Revolutionary Films, and the guy started to look through the script. And they went in very nervously on the Monday morning, and he says, "I know exactly what this movie's about. This movie's about Terri Hooley." I checked him. I Googled him at the weekend. I read all about him. He says, "This is brilliant. This is," and then for years, things seemed to be on, off, and now BBC Films are on board. And they're really worried about me saying anything about the movie.
But it's a very exciting time.
But it is,
though, isn't it?
It is, and it's brilliant. I mean, I think it's a really good story about Belfast. I think it's a story of just a wee guy who was very lonely and in his bedroom, and all he had was his music and a transistor radio, and then he met these girls, and he discovered this whole world of sex, drugs, and rock and roll, and completely changed my life. And they're all dead, and unfortunately. And Pauline Harrison, who was the biggest influence in my life, she was raped and murdered in New York 25 years ago. And there's never a day goes by I don't think about her. Yeah. So, and it's this whole thing about Jack Lemmon meeting Catherine Nerve, and she completely changed his life. Yeah. Now every woman I meet's a future Mrs. Hooley, because I'm never getting married again.
But that chance encounter thing,
yes, it was, and
it
is, and that's what I love about this movie. But plus the fact that isn't this movie, all the clubs and stuff, it isn't like the 60s that I grew up in. And I just find this movie very endearing, and something beautiful about it. And I could watch Catherine and her for hours.
Yeah, absolutely.
Without a doubt. But I think it's got a great script and great characters and some great lines in it. Just to me, it's wonderful. But it is my guilty pleasure. I don't expect anybody else to like it, but I love it to bits. I never thought I'd be ever talking about this. I never thought I would have the guts to go on and talk about how much I love this movie.
Well, I'm very appreciative. Terri, listen, it's been a great pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you very much.
And best of luck with the film, with Good Vibrations.
Yeah, I hope I'm alive to see the end of it. That's the thing.
You're going to see yourself on the big screen.
I'm completely burnt out. The last 2 weeks have been a roller coaster ride of parties, openings, gigs, and the Cathedral Quarter Festival is my favourite festival in the world, and I'm just completely burnt out.
Well, save yourself for this film coming now. That's the important thing. Thank you very much.
Thank you.